are we invasive? For years, we have contributed to the destruction of the Earth's ecosystem. Every day, its health deteriorates because of how we live: pollution, climate change, ozone layer depletion, and many more. However, we also contribute to the advancement of the Earth. We replace what is lost, and we preserve the beauty of nature and those who live in it. Since we're constantly tearing down and rebuilding the world we live in, this means we affect all the elements around us. With this, it's difficult to answer if we are truly invasive, but using evidence, we will be able to answer this.
The oxygen cycle describes the process of how oxygen moves through the three regions of the Earth, namely the atmosphere, the biosphere, and the lithosphere. Oxygen in the atmosphere is released with the process of photolysis. The sunlight would separate the molecules that have oxygen in them in order to release the oxygen. The ozone cycle is an example of the photolysis. It's a process where O2 is broken down into oxygen by the sunlight's UV radiation. The oxygen that has been released is then combined with the remaining O2, thus creating O3 or ozone. The atmosphere is the lowest source of oxygen, despite it being the region of the Earth with the most gas. Biosphere oxygen is released with two main cycles, namely respiration and photosynthesis. The process of respiration is when living beings breathe in and out, consuming oxygen, then exhaling out carbon dioxide.
Photosynthesis is quite the opposite. Plants and plankton uses carbon dioxide in order to make their own food. Oxygen is the byproduct of this, and it's released into the biosphere for humans and animals to breathe in. Another thing is that the biosphere contains the smallest amount of oxygen. Lastly, the lithosphere releases oxygen with the use of chemical weathering in minerals. It's an automatic process that happens when a mineral that contains oxygen inside it interacts with an element. A chemical reaction from the element releases the oxygen from within the material. The said minerals are mostly silicates and oxides. The lithosphere is also the largest source of oxygen.
Invasive species. One result of globalization is that biodiversity has now been moved. In addition to people and goods that travel across the globe, the tradition of moving animals to new areas goes back centuries. For certain cases, transported animals or plants in their new locations do not survive. A lack of sufficient food, combined with the wrong environment, will result in animals having a short lifespan. However, there are also many instances where species thrive and are able to replicate and disperse successfully in their new habitats. These species can wreak havoc on the new area and become invasive species when that happens. The introduction of a species into a new environment will offer a range of outcomes, but it does not necessarily mean that it have adverse consequences. Yet, when this happens, or when these alien species appear to have harmful effects in the new habitat, they are considered invasive species. Invasive species can cause damage to the environment, economic harm, or effect on human health.
Through several routes, invasive species can invade new ecosystems. Some are intentionally transported to new places with unforeseen consequences. Many different components of the ecosystem will promote their spread once they reach a new environment. For example, roads provide an invasive route for moving into new areas. Invasive organisms have a variety of negative effects on the environments they are entering. Invasive species not only destroy habitat, but they can also destroy large numbers of endemic species. There are several methods created to stop the damage done by invasive species and to deter possible invasions. Educating people about the risks of moving animals to new places is a significant aspect. There are also several laws and legislation passed to prevent the potential spread of invasive
For the anthropogenic effects in invasive species, the introduction of majority of them is frequently related to human activities. This can be done unintentionally. For instance, boats that travel in different waters has the potential to carry species that can attach to other animals or objects for dispersal, called hitchhikers. An example of a hitchhiker is zebra mussels, which can clog pipes and overhaul beaches. Some invasive species are spread intentionally, such as cane toads. They were introduced by farmers to Australia to decrease the amount of pests on their crops. But the cane toads did not stay on the crops and instead spread throughout the continent. We can also spread plant species as well, such as the kudzu vine. The kudzu vine originated in East Asia and was brought to the southeastern United States for porch decoration and as a source of food for cattle. However, with sunny fields, lenient climate, and no natural predators in its new location, the vines grew uncontrollably, clinching the nickname the vine that ate the South.
Here's the thing. Aren't you curious about identical twins? Identical twins originated with one and same DNA. But how come they are different from each other? Twins possesses the exact same DNA sequence but different in food intake, nutrition intake, experiences, and diet. And this can lead us to epigenetics. So what is epigenetics? Epigenetics is the study of heritable changes in gene expression that switches genes on and off and denotes active genes versus inactive ones that do not involve modification in DNA sequence. To simplify, it implies a change in phenotype or physical attribute without changing its genotype, which in turn affects how cells read and interpret the genes. Epigenetics literally mean above or on top of the genetics.
Another example is the uniqueness of human beings. There are people who are light and dark skinned, blonde and dark haired, and varied eye colors and heights. Epigenetic change is a regular and a natural occurrence, but it can also be influenced by several factors of nurture and nature, such as age, habits, lifestyle, environment, and everything a person does on a daily basis. Epigenetic modifications can manifest as common as a manner in which cells differentiate, ending up as skin cell, liver cell, brain cell, etc. When the phenotype gets altered, it can be passed on to the succeeding generations. Epigenetic change, however, can have more damaging effects, which can then result to diseases like cancer. Some researchers are continuously uncovering the role of epigenetics in a variety of human disorders and fatal diseases.
So, with all of that said, we are invasive. Without us, the world would thrive, plants will grow, wildlife would be more diverse than it is, and the world would move on. There are so many things we've done on this earth, yet we've only done a fraction of what we can do for it. If we want to have a truly positive impact in the world we live in today, changes need to be made. Like reducing usage of power and fossil fuels, think of how we could save flora and fauna. The things we can do to help Mother Nature is boundless. So, yes, we are invasive, but does our good outweigh the bad? That's for you to decide and take action.